It's great to be with you tonight. I come from a network called Collaboration for Impact, and I'm going to just leave you to read that while I'm going to follow Jax's lead and just bring in, why am I up here talking about co-creation of social outcomes across systems, silos and sectors? It's because I used to work in youth justice, so I was a criminal lawyer working only with kids between 10 and 18, and if you want an exercise in pure systems failure, I recommend you take that job. So how that came to me was representing kids in court, and you get these incredibly detailed court reports about what's going to happen in this young person's life if they don't go to jail. And you only have to work in court for about a year to meet a child's next sibling down. And I actually was sitting there reading next sibling down's court report thinking, I actually think this is a cut and paste where they've taken older child's name out and inserted younger child's name. And I actually went back and dug out his older sibling's file, and it absolutely was a cut and paste, which meant in the course of a year, nothing had changed in that family's conditions. Nothing had changed in that family's circumstances to support a child not to offend, and nothing had changed in the system that was supporting that family. And yet that family was completely under notice of the system. So a very similar story to Jack's. And maybe similar stories to some of you in the room about when you work in a system which only sees problems as services to be provided, or products to be provided. It's a very limited way and very inherently fragmented way to create social change. So Collaboration for Impact has a long story of being born out of people frustrated by that. So what I wanted to share tonight, what I've been asked to share tonight, is what are some of the practices that actually help people who want to address complex problems, whether they sit in community, like in a place with a boundary, or whether they're on complex problems that don't have easy boundaries, like youth drug addiction. How do these change processes happen in a way to create really tangible outcomes and large-scale outcomes? So I thought I'd talk about... I thought I'd set some music going. I thought I'd...
Jax, check that.
Hang on. I've got a pop-up box. Ta-da.
Is there a pop-up? Hang on. We're trying to be techie, but it's failed. I might just pull it out and just stick with the normal way it works.
Can I keep talking with you?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. So I thought I'd talk about 3 learnings, or 3 really important things that we as a network have learned into. This is really over the last 4 years. So we build capacity in people and in collaborations to create large-scale change, the type of change that no single person, in fact no organisation or no sector could create on their own. And we started that, honestly, from quite a narrow view. And through doing the work and through learning with and alongside collaborative change processes, we've really expanded our view. And we've now tried to distill what we've learned into, well, what are the things that really enable large-scale change, systems change. I used to call it redesigning the system, and then I had someone say to me, quite rightly, it's very arrogant to think that you can change systems. The best you can ever do is nudge them to be better than what they are today. So this is how I think you get the nudges happening. And there's 3 things. One is the leadership practice required for systems change. The other one is the collaborative design. And the third one is, how do you actually measure impact as long-term change processes unfold? So I thought I'd just spend my 15 minutes talking a little bit about those 3 things, and then at the end, if we've got time, bring them to life through a case study. So I think the leadership practice for systems change actually starts with each one of us. Doing systems change is, I think, some of the most challenging leadership work that the people that I know who are doing it have done in their lives. And that there's a lot of work that you've got to do on yourself to be able to see that you are part of the system you're trying to change. Like, we are all products of the system we want to change. So we're just as much part of the problem as we are part of the solution. And that others are too. But I think to effectively lead systems change, you have to first understand the difference about how problems are complex. And complex problems are a different type of problem to more simple or complicated problems. And what do they ask of us? They ask us to collaborate across, to work across boundaries, to say that there's no, like I said earlier, no one place, no one organisation that has the expertise. If expertise was going to solve this, we would be solving it. And to understand that to intervene in a system, we need to know the system we want to change, and not just in terms of mapping who's in it and what hours are they open. It's understanding how do they interrelate, what are the relationships, how does authority get shared, how does power work, how does data and money flow. These are the places where, when we map systems and understand the way they operate, we can see where can you intervene to break a pattern that does not serve people and create a new pattern that nudges the system to serve people better. And I think we need to learn how to lead into complexity, and this is a very different leadership to hierarchical. Leading across boundaries by definitions means we are leading when we have very little authority. I can't, if I'm leading a collaboration and there's government, citizens, non-profits, philanthropy, research at the table, I don't employ any of them. I have to learn to lead through creating environments that keep people in the room, even when it gets hot and the tension rises, they don't jump out of the process. And I have to lead through influence, which is really about aligning people to purpose. So I think some of you may have seen this sort of stuff. This is in the middle, a classic definition of a complex problem. On this side is how we traditionally respond, through what I say is quite a linear view, a programmatic response to complexity. And on the other side is the type of response we need to be moving to as leaders. So, we value in the social sector, in society, we value expertise and niche specialisations. We need to move to be able to orchestrate the expertise and the assets and strengths of many. So I'll leave them for you to read, but working from silos to boundaries. This one I love. Plan the work the plan. Doesn't fly in complex systems. We need to know how to put experiments or tests into the system and watch how they work, and say dial up what works, dial down what doesn't. It's much more. This is where co-design has so much to teach us, or design principles. How do we run tests within the system to say what will break the patterns that don't serve people? So the second key, I think, is designing incredibly good collaborative processes. So I think to lead effective systems change, you have to understand how to design processes for human beings, ones that do hearts, minds and hands. But you also need to know how to facilitate learning. So everyone arrives in a collaborative process basically saying, I'm here to understand what I can get out of this for my part of the system. And you have to create a process strong enough to move them from what is actually very isolated self-interest to shared purpose. And I don't think we talk about this stuff enough. There are amazing good technical processes for design, for collaboration, and taking large groups of people through collaborative processes. And I'm a big believer in them. I spend almost all my time doing only that. But I think we need to start talking about that in collaboration as an exercise is inherently about loss. And if we're trying to change the system, I don't know if you've heard, I think it's Margaret Wheatley saying our job is to help the existing system die with dignity and let the new system emerge. So when we're changing systems, there is a massive, weighted, highly invested status quo that has resources and expertise, and people have dedicated their life to making change in a certain way, and we're trying to challenge that way of working. So I think at a systems level, we're navigating loss of the system that's dying. At an organisational level or a sector level, we're asking people to do things that are uncomfortable. So if we're talking about organisational loss, I think the most poignant example for me is if we come together as a collaboration to end homelessness, at least one of us in the room will be a homelessness provider, like a refuge. So if we are successful in our purpose, we put them out of business. And they have to align to that purpose. So, I mean, that's making the example of organisational loss really stark. And I think at a personal level, particularly social change agents, it's an extension of themselves. So how do people who have dedicated their life to making change in a certain way actually let go of being the expert and take up a role of a learner? These are the types of collaborative processes I think we need to be really careful and thoughtful about how we design, how to help people navigate loss, because the impact is what is the greater impact is the promise. And the last one, I'm going to skip through these because I'm close to time, is to effectively make systems change. I think we need to get a new approach to measurement and data. Systems change, at a very minimum, is going to take 7 years before we see population level change. You're spending at least 2 years convening, connecting people to purpose, facilitating shared learning, helping our people get a systems view instead of an isolated programmatic view. Those things are personal changes, organisational changes to get to shared purpose. So what we measure in the first 2 years simply cannot be, are we impacting on the lives of citizens yet? And we need different ways of understanding the timelines. And what can we measure to prove we're making progress in those early days? And there is a lot that we can measure. So we need to get really good at understanding that systems change processes have life cycles of themselves. This is a broad brush. The first 2 years is really about establishment and shared purpose. The 2 to 5 years about, are we seeing proxy changes? Are we seeing behaviour change in the system that is suggestive of a new system emerging? Is it more responsive? Is authority moving to places where people have less power? Is data and information and ideas flowing more freely? Are people who are less heard now being heard? These are the proxy indicators that lead to a new system emerging, and it's at the 7 year, usually 7 year plus mark, where we're saying, okay, we can see whole systems change happening, population improvements rising. So I think we need a revolution actually in the way we talk about, train, let me go back one, talk about and train evaluators. As a networked organisation, we are hungrily searching for evaluators who know how to evaluate in environments of high uncertainty. And they're hen's teeth. So if there are any of you in the room, I would love to meet you. But how does data and evaluation help us build understanding across difference, across sectors, across boundaries? Data and evaluation help us align to shared purpose before we then start using data for what we know how to do really well, which is monitor and inform is the new system emerging. I've got 2 minutes left.
You've got 7 minutes.
Oh, I've got 7.
Yeah.
Okay, we can tell you a story. So I in the communities that I work with, I have a particular favourite. So I'm sorry if I've spoken and you've heard me talk about this community before, but it's in far west New South Wales called Burke. And this is a story where Burke was on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald in 2013 saying, Burke, more dangerous than any American city. And a classic example of the people in Burke were not the makers of their own story. And often when you're looking for, is this initiative got the promise of being able to change the system? The thing you're looking first is the story changing? Is the narrative changing? And in Burke it was. It was an absolute groundswell of we are the makers of our own future and we're going to take control of our own story. In fact, every decision made from a human services point of view happened away from Burke. There are 3,500 people. They're 4 hours drive from the nearest airport. All of the decisions were made in Sydney or Dubbo. They weren't even at those tables. Their whole mandate, ambitious as it was, is we're going to create the table in this town and the people that have power and money will move to our table. So they did that. It took them years to work across what is historically Burke is a colonised town. So there's 21 clan groups in Burke. Most of them are not settled on their own land. They're forcibly settled there. So you had a very fractured Indigenous community. This is Indigenous-led reform. They took years of working out how do they get a unified decision-making structure for 21 clan groups in Burke. Great example of early systems change, new structures, new authority being emerging. And they had a call for change which they called Marinuka, to care for others in one of the dialects. And they set this overarching theory of change that was highly ambitious. And they started building the more authority behind that story of change. This is from families, not from... So they said, if you want to do business in Burke, we will create the forum where you come, government, you come, new business owner, you come, philanthropist, you come, new service provider. You will be required on your KPIs to be delivering services and supporting Aboriginal families. We will broker that for you, and we will make your support of Aboriginal families in Burke work for those families. So they created new structures, and they were using access to Aboriginal families to shift the power imbalance. It was a pretty big experiment, but it worked. And their hot button was 1 in 5 young people in their community was in jail on any given day. So they wanted to say no children from this town will go to jail. So they convened around that, and they got all of the people. There's not a single service, 4 years later, there's not a single service provider in Burke that is not aligned to that purpose. And the highest power that they report to, everyone still reports up to, particularly government, up through their reporting lines to ministers. But the authority that you come and hold yourself accountable to is the Burke Tribal Council, 2 representatives from every family group. They made a request for data, to put data into the system that says, what is the sum of us, the outcomes we're creating for young people? They were very poor outcomes. But this is the sum of us now, creating these families, service providers, governments, local government, that's the sum of us. They got lawyers engaged from departments not to release the data. And it took the intervention of the Premier, and they got data flowing into the community. They're now reporting on that every 3 months. Data is as an enabler for change. How can we be better? Facilitating learning, right down to how many kids have missed 18 days of school this term. How do we prioritise those children and those families? So good use of confidentiality, but highly responsive support responses to the system. Last thing to share is their strategy was in some ways programmatic. If you want to if you want no kids from your community to go to jail, invest in the early years. Intergenerational change, build strong early development, health and wellbeing milestones, strong families. Those kids won't, they'll grow up with better trajectories. Obviously intervene 8 to 18 when kids are offending. But their system-busting strategy was, we need to reimagine the role of man in the lives of our children. That was data and community insights working on, this is a high leverage intervention point in our system. If we can change the way men see themselves, we will get whole, systems change through the system that matters most to young people, which is their families. So I think that's a really powerful example. They are only 9 months into implementation, and they've been 4 years hard yakka at creating shared purpose strong enough to hold all of the budget holders in a room. So they're only just starting to see the curve turn now. They have the lowest offending rates they've had in 5 years. They have the lowest driving offence rates they've had in 10 years. And they have the highest school retention that they've had in the last 3 years. It's 4 years in. So these processes take time, and I think it's the leadership and the way people lead differently. They lead at a systems level, not at an organisational program level. It's the collaborative processes designed for that community and its context about how to hold people together. It's really clever use of data to drive learning that has created that change. So I hope that's a useful kick-off for tonight. And I look forward to your questions and the other speakers.